The divorce papers hit my dining table before my father-in-law said a single word. He smiled. "You can't afford a lawyer to fight my son," Arthur Vance said. "So save yourself the humiliation and sign." Richard stood beside him. He didn't defend me. He didn't argue. He didn't even meet my eyes. After 8 years of marriage, my husband chose silence over me. I looked at the papers. Richard would keep the house, the business, our savings, almost everything we'd built together. Arthur folded his arms, waiting for me to break. Instead, I looked him in the eye and quietly said, "You're right." He laughed. Richard smiled. They thought I'd just surrendered. 3 weeks later, those same smiles would disappear inside a courtroom. But Arthur made one mistake. He assumed he knew everything about me. My name is Sophia Bennett, and the biggest mistake I ever made was believing love could change people who only loved themselves. When Richard and I married, his property management company was barely surviving. I worked beside him every day, answering tenant calls, balancing the books, and fixing problems long after everyone else went home. As the business grew, everyone praised Richard. I never asked for credit. I only wanted us to succeed. Arthur loved that. At every family dinner, he'd toast Richard's success and pretend I wasn't part of it. The first time I expected my husband to correct him, he didn't. When I confronted Richard later, he simply shrugged. "It's easier this way." I ignored the warning because I believed marriage meant sacrifice. Then, 2 weeks before the divorce papers arrived, I lost access to our joint bank account. Richard called it a banking update. That night, I walked past his office and heard Arthur's voice through the half-open door. "Once she signs, everything transfers," Richard asked quietly. "And if she refuses?" Arthur gave a confident laugh. "She won't." My heart sank. I wasn't listening to a father controlling his son. I was listening to two partners making plans. As I packed a small overnight bag that night, one thought refused to leave my mind. Arthur believed I was completely alone. He never once asked about the family I had left behind. That mistake was about to cost him everything. The next morning, I didn't call a divorce lawyer. I called the one person Arthur Vance had never bothered to ask about. My brother. We hadn't been close for years. Not because we didn't love each other, but because I had insisted on building my life without relying on my family. He answered on the second ring. "Sophia, I need you." 30 minutes later, Marcus was sitting across from me, with the divorce papers spread across my kitchen table. Marcus wasn't just my older brother. For more than a decade, he'd built a career investigating complex financial disputes for major corporations. If anyone could tell me whether Arthur was bluffing, it was him. He read every page twice. Finally, he looked up. "Did you sign anything?" I shook my head. "Good, because something doesn't feel right." He couldn't explain it yet, and honestly, neither could I. Over the next several days, Arthur made sure I never forgot the deadline. He left cheerful voicemails, reminding me to be realistic. Richard sent polite texts asking if I'd signed the agreement yet, ending each one with, "I don't want this to get ugly," as if it hadn't already. Marcus requested copies of old financial records I'd saved over the years, but several files were missing. "So we're stuck?" I asked. "For now," he admitted. Someone worked hard to cover their tracks. For the first time since this nightmare began, I saw uncertainty on his face. Then, 3 days later, everything changed. Marcus rushed into my apartment carrying a folder. "I found something." He laid 2 documents side by side. "They look identical," I said. "They're not." He pointed to my signature. "This one came from a lease you signed 3 years ago. This one was used to transfer your ownership rights." I stared at them. At first, they looked the same. Then I noticed it. The last letter in my signature curved the wrong way. My stomach dropped. Someone forged my name. Marcus nodded. "And that's only the beginning." I could barely breathe. "Are you saying Richard knew about this?" Marcus didn't answer right away. Instead, he slid one final document toward me. It showed a large transfer from the company into an account I'd never seen before, dated 2 weeks before. Richard asked for the divorce. Marcus met my eyes. "Sophia, this stopped being a divorce the moment they forged your signature." He closed the folder. "From this point on, it's a criminal case." Then he said something I'll never forget. Don't answer another call. Don't sign another page. Let Arthur keep believing you can't afford a lawyer. The next time he sees us, we'll be inside a courtroom. 3 weeks later, I walked into the county courthouse alone. Exactly as Arthur expected. He sat beside Richard wearing an expensive navy suit and the same smug smile he'd worn the day he handed me the divorce papers. When he saw me without a lawyer, he smirked. I was beginning to think you'd finally accepted reality, he said. There's still time to sign. Richard didn't say a word. He simply looked away. For a moment, I wondered if he felt even a hint of guilt. Then the courtroom doors opened. Arthur glanced back with a bored expression. It disappeared the instant Marcus walked in. He wasn't alone. 2 attorneys from his firm followed behind him, carrying neatly organized case files. Marcus calmly took the seat beside me. Sorry to keep everyone waiting, he said. Arthur laughed. So, you finally found a lawyer? Marcus smiled politely. No, I found the truth. Arthur's attorney immediately stood. Your Honor, this is a straightforward divorce proceeding. We object to any attempt to introduce unrelated allegations. Marcus nodded. I understand. Then he placed 2 documents before the judge. The first contains my client's verified signature. The second transferred her ownership interest. Arthur's attorney barely glanced at them. Signatures can vary. They can, Marcus agreed. Which is why these have already been examined by an independent forensic document specialist. The courtroom grew noticeably quieter. Arthur shifted in his chair for the first time. His attorney tried again. Even if that were true, it has nothing to do with today's hearing. Marcus reached into his folder and removed another document. It does when the forged signature was used to remove my client from company ownership. Richard's confidence vanished. He leaned toward his father and whispered something urgently. Arthur ignored him. This is ridiculous, Arthur snapped. She's trying to steal what my son built. Marcus didn't raise his voice. Then perhaps you can explain why company funds were transferred into an undisclosed account less than 2 weeks before the divorce was filed. Arthur's attorney froze. Richard's face turned pale. For the first time since our marriage ended, he looked directly at me. He wasn't angry. He was terrified. The judge slowly reviewed each document before setting them neatly on the bench. These allegations are extremely serious, she said. This court will take a brief recess to review the evidence before deciding how to proceed. The gavel struck. No one spoke. Arthur stared at the floor. The smile that had followed him for years was finally gone. For the first time in 8 years, he looked exactly the way he'd always wanted me to feel. Completely afraid. When the court reconvened, the room was silent. The judge looked over the stack of documents one last time before speaking. Based on the evidence presented today, this court finds sufficient grounds to suspend these proceedings and order a full forensic review of the parties' financial records. Arthur's confident smile disappeared. His attorney leaned over and whispered something urgently. But Arthur didn't seem to hear him. This isn't possible, he muttered. Marcus calmly closed his folder. It is now. Over the next several months, independent investigators uncovered exactly what Arthur had spent years trying to hide. Company funds had been diverted through undisclosed accounts. Ownership records had been altered without proper authorization, and multiple financial documents contained signatures that experts determined were not mine. The final hearing was nothing like the first. This time, Arthur avoided looking at me. Richard looked exhausted. When the judge issued the final ruling, she awarded me my lawful share of the marital estate, recognized my documented contributions to the business, and ordered additional civil proceedings regarding the financial misconduct uncovered during the investigation. Richard finally looked at me. I should have listened to you, he said quietly. Instead, I listened to my father and lost everything that mattered. I didn't answer. Some lessons only arrive after the damage is done. As we walked out of the courthouse, Arthur called my name. For the first time since I'd met him, there was no arrogance in his voice, only defeat. I turned around. He lowered his eyes. I underestimated you. I shook my head. No, Arthur. You underestimated the truth. I walked down the courthouse steps with Marcus beside me, breathing easier than I had in years. Arthur had spent 8 years learning everything he could about my finances, my marriage, and my future, but he never cared enough to learn about the family standing quietly behind me. The day he decided I couldn't afford a lawyer wasn't the day he won. It was the day he guaranteed his own downfall. Sometimes justice doesn't arrive with shouting. Sometimes it walks calmly into a courtroom and lets the truth do all the talking. Subscribe to Revenge Diaries and join us for more unforgettable stories of betrayal, justice, and karma.